All right, today we're diving into a really classic piece of Islamic scholarship, the tafseer of Ibn Kathir. Now, a tafseer is basically a deep dive commentary on the Quran, where scholars help unpack the meaning, the historical context, and the wisdom behind the verses.
And we're zooming in on its explanation of the Quran's third chapter, Surah Al Imran. So, why this chapter? Well, because this ancient text lays out a fascinating framework for a problem that feels incredibly modern. How do we tell the difference between truth and misinformation? And why do people twist information to begin with?
So let's start with the central idea here, which is pretty provocative. What if a sacred book was intentionally designed to do two things at once? To be a crystal clear guide for living, but also a profound test of your own intentions as a reader.
To even begin to unpack that, we first have to understand the message itself. The text starts by laying out its own authority, its own origin story, if you will.
The commentary immediately puts us in a real-world situation. We're not in the realm of abstract ideas. These verses were revealed during a specific historical event, a dialogue between the early Muslim community and a Christian delegation that visited them way back in the year 632.
So, here's the bedrock of the message. The text says there's this continuous stream of revelation from one God. First came the Torah, then the Gospel, and now the Quran, which it says confirms those earlier scriptures. But here's the crucial part. It also mentions something called the criterion, a built-in tool for telling truth from falsehood.
And that idea of a criterion brings us right to the heart of this whole explainer. The text says that the book itself is made up of two totally different kinds of verses, the ones that are perfectly clear and the ones that aren't.
First up, you have what are called the muhammat. The best way to think about these is like the structural pillars of a building. They are solid, unambiguous, and everyone can see them for what they are. They spell out the core laws, the do's and don'ts, the absolute fundamentals.
And then you have the mutashabihat. These are the verses that aren't so black and white. They are open to interpretation. They're filled with parables, metaphors, and allegories. They aren't for making laws, but for making you think.
This comparison really nails the difference. The clear verses, the muhammat, they're the foundation. They're meant to be put into practice. They are, as it says, unequivocal proof. But the unclear verses, they are a test. They require faith, and they are where interpretation comes into play. And this distinction, it's everything.
So a book is built this way, with these two different kinds of verses. What happens when people actually read it? Well, this leads us to a fork in the road.
And the commentary is very direct about this. It says, your character, your inner self, is revealed by how you handle these ambiguous verses. Do you approach them to find truth, or do you use them to create confusion?
The first path is for those with, as the text describes it, a deviation in their hearts. They knowingly ignore the clear, foundational verses, and instead they fixate only on the ambiguous ones. And why would they do that? Their goal is to stir up trouble and twist the meaning to serve their own purposes.
The commentary actually gives a very specific example. It mentions how someone might cherry-pick a phrase like "spirit from Allah" to argue that Jesus is divine, while deliberately ignoring all the clear foundational verses that state he was a servant and a messenger. It's a classic case of weaponizing ambiguity. But then you have the second path. This one is for people who are firmly grounded in knowledge. And what do? The exact opposite. They use the clear, solid verses as their anchor to help them navigate the more complex ones. They come to the text with humility, saying, "We believe in all of it. It's all from God." And their whole mindset is perfectly captured in this prayer from the text. It's a plea to be kept on the right path, to be protected from that very deviation that defines the first group. You see, it's about seeking genuine guidance, not just trying to win an argument.
So, as you can imagine, these two very different paths of interpretation don't end up in the same place. The text draws a really stark contrast between a worldly return and an excellent return.
For those who choose the path of twisting the meaning and rejecting the clear message, the text doesn't mince words. It says all the worldly things they chase after, money, power, status, none of it will help them in the end. They become, in the book's very powerful imagery, fuel of the fire.
And the text is specific about what these worldly attachments are. Family, huge amounts of wealth, luxury goods like beautiful horses, livestock, and productive land. It gets their appeal, calling them the pleasure of the present world's life. But the key word there is present. It's temporary.
And then, in the very next breath, it presents the alternative. For those who chose the path of guidance, the reward is something far better.
Not temporary pleasures, but an eternal home, purified relationships, and the ultimate prize, the pleasure of God. The contrast is just night and day.
And that's really the bottom line here. This isn't just an intellectual debate about literary theory. According to this commentary, the way you choose to interpret information, whether you do it with humility or with arrogance, is a choice that has an eternal outcome.
Which brings us full circle, right back to where we started. If a text, any text really, can be both a clear guide and a test of your character, what does that mean for our responsibility as readers, especially today, in an age of constant misinformation? This ancient commentary seems to suggest that the real search for truth isn't just about spotting lies out there, but about checking our own intentions in here first.